Now, the big thing I want you to hear is there is hope. I have worked with many, many people who have severe trauma like yours, even worse, and I have watched them do the hard work over months and years and really begin to grow and change and just find connection, find how to get their needs met in healthy ways. And it's just a beautiful transformation to watch. Hi, I just wanted to say a little bit about this Align with Your Needs self-study course. Over 21 years ago, this was the very first workshop that I was asked to prepare for people in a treatment center. And I began to look at what makes us human, why do we do what we do? And I began to look at what are my needs, how do I meet my needs? And it led to the creation of the 12 needs. And what I saw as I began to teach that workshop was that it had three effects on clients. First of all, it really helped them begin to understand their little t trauma, the neglect stuff, the stuff that seems invisible. It's that their needs weren't met, mainly their emotional needs, and it was huge light bulbs. Then it helped them to understand how they got into addiction. They were trying to solve the pain that they couldn't resolve any other way. And then it showed them the path forward in recovery, that recovery isn't just a magic fix, a simple little wee solution where you do step 1, 2, 3 and everything is good. It's learning to meet your 12 needs. So I just saw tremendous positive impact. And as I taught it over the years, I saw clients with just light bulbs happening every time I taught it, huge insights into why they did what they did, what they needed to change. I saw tears as people finally began to acknowledge the unmet needs and how painful that was. And then I saw people beginning to understand what recovery was really all about, learning to meet your 12 needs. What I've seen over the years is that teaching has become the foundation of all that we teach about trauma and recovery. It's the starting point for many people. It's the guide as they go into recovery. It just is such a foundational piece in building a solid recovery. So I hope you'll take advantage of this and sign up for the course. Well, welcome to another chat with Tim. I want to look at another letter today that we received, and we've decided to do this periodically where I respond to letters that people send us with questions about their own lives and recovery. And I do it with some reservations because in an in-person setting, I would be able to really explore what they share with me to make sure I'm understanding it, to fill in some of the pieces that might be in my mind about their story and their trauma and the wounds that came out of that and the maladaptations that developed. And so I respond knowing that I'm making some assumptions, knowing that I might be missing some of the things, but I hope that what I say at least gives people a starting point, some new insight maybe into their journey that will be helpful to them. So the letter today is from somebody we're going to call S. And it says this: Dear Tim, I was given up at birth and moved between different homes for the first several months of my life. I experienced sexual abuse early in my life. My adoptive father was responsible. He eventually went to jail, though not for what he did to me. He also abused my mother, which contributed to her trauma and her inability to care for me and my half-sister and my aunts. I was the one closest to him for the 4 years leading up to his incarceration. I spent nearly every day with him, even visiting him in jail, trying to understand whether he would ever admit what he had done. At that time, I didn't fully understand or realize what had happened to me as a child because I was so young when it occurred. As an adult, after I overcame addiction, I started having recurring dreams that helped me piece it together. I'm certain I have complex trauma and attachment wounds. I find it extremely hard to be close or intimate with anyone. I kept quiet about all of this for decades. When I finally spoke up, many family members either dismissed me or reacted with anger. I reached out to my biological mother for the first time to tell her I didn't resent her for giving me up. After reading and learning more, I had the sense that she may have faced similar trauma herself. Our reunion fell apart this year. There was too much pain, too much unspoken history, and not enough communication or healing within the family, especially among the women who were harmed by the man who was supposed to be my father. I also struggle with the lack of self-reflection or compassion from my relatives. I wonder if I have alexithymia. I've lived with long-term depression, exhaustion, and have been out of work for more than a decade. I find learning difficult and struggle to communicate in professional environments. My temper is intense. I can't be around alcohol. I sometimes have urges to harm myself or others, and I deal with physical and somatic pain. I did a short round of counseling through a survivors organization in my city. I apologize to people I hurt or cut off in the past, but even with that, I still feel out of place, like an outsider to the world around me. I never felt motivated to make my parents proud. Ending it always felt like an escape hatch, or jail did. I've had very little support in daily life. I don't like using technology and prefer face-to-face interactions. I don't know how to apply for work without explaining the challenges I live with. I can't see a realistic path forward. What would your advice be? I want to help lonely or neglected young people someday. I just don't know what my priorities should be right now. Well, thank you, S, for sharing so vulnerably and openly. I want to say up front, and I want you to know this is without judgment at all, but I would, from what you've shared, put you on the more severe end of the trauma spectrum. You've gone through a lot. You've experienced wound after wound. So let me just outline that, and then I want to look at kind of what your survival tools look like, your adaptations that you had to do to survive. So number one, you went through abandonment at birth, and then were abandoned regularly as you moved from house to house. Then you were abandoned by what became your adopted father when he went to jail. So to me, you have this very deep abandonment wound, and that is significant. Also, with that, there was just a lack of attachment, that you were never able to create a secure attachment with anybody. And so that would be why you don't feel like you fit in now. You just feel like a total outsider. But more than that, as I look at the relationship with your adoptive father, to me, there's some trauma bonding there. He's wounding you deeply and wounding your mother, but you feel such an attachment to him. Then there's a lack of stability. You've been shipped around, your father went to jail, sexual abuse, all of those things. Lack of safety, lack of security, lack of stability. So those are major needs that every child has that weren't met in you. And then the sexual abuse from a young age, to me, is very significant. And then to me, there's an element of neglect in your story where your emotional needs weren't taken care of very well. And I think from what I see in some of the responses to you, there was an overriding element of criticism in the family dynamic, so that you were not validated as much as you were criticized. And then when you went public about your sexual abuse, there's a family dynamic of denial, that people don't want to look at stuff honestly. They don't want to look at the facts. And then they refuse to do deep self-reflection and really look at deeper issues. That to me is massive, that there's just this denial. And then you had to watch your mother be abused by your father. And so all of that results in this, I think, massive shame that if I'm abandoned, if I'm abused, if everybody's denying what I see and feel, then I must not matter. So shame to me is a deep core belief that goes along with the abandonment. And so a child that says, if I'm abandoned, then I must basically be a zero. I don't matter. I'm not lovable. It's two massive wounds that are there. And then I think because the trauma happened at such a young age, that the trauma was stored in your body. So now you experience all kinds of different somatic type of pain. So that's a lot of trauma that you have been through. And my heart goes out to you for that. So what then did you have to do to survive? Well, you talked about you had all of this anger from your needs not being met, from being treated unjustly, from being abused. So anger is a major issue. And then addiction, that you had to try to escape all of this pain and chaos. And then self-harm, that you turned your anger inward on yourself. And that actually made you feel a little bit better. And then that shame just in all your relationships, that if anybody gets to know me, they'll probably reject me as well and abandon me. So that led to depression issues, not feeling like you belong, trouble identifying your emotions because you had suppressed your emotions so long, but then trouble regulating your emotions when you get triggered. So these massive outbursts. And then relationship struggles, struggling with intimacy, struggling with even wanting relationships, burnout, physical somatic pain. All of that is, to me, that's what I would expect. That is how the brain tries to adapt to survive. And so where do you go from here? And this, I think, is where I just really want to get very practical. But it's also very challenging because you recognize that you have some limitations and you don't do well with learning, technology, all of those type of things. And so there's an element in your healing journey that to me you're going to have to just very in small steps push yourself out of your comfort zone. Force yourself to do things you don't feel comfortable doing, learn things that you don't enjoy learning. And that's going to be part of your journey. So you talked about you prefer face-to-face over technology stuff. And that's fantastic. But there's, I guess, a potential downside to that. It depends where you live, but there's most places in the world now will talk about being trauma-informed, but their understanding of trauma is very surface. And so they might give you a little bit of help, but they're not going to help you get to the deep abandonment, shame, maladaptation stuff. And so that's where, to me, I go, it really would depend on the program that you would want to get into as to how deeply they understand trauma. Do they really get complex trauma, or are they just really preoccupied with big T trauma, PTSD type stuff? So you need to check that out. But the fact that you were able to send an email to us and watch some videos online would say you have a little bit of understanding of technology. And so this is where I would really encourage you to take part in either our self-study program that you can get online or our LIFT program. I think from what you've shared with us that you're very early in beginning to understand trauma and how it affected you and the recovery part of trauma. I just think you would get so much help if you were able to access this online program for yourself. But then the next thing I want you to understand is this is a slow process. You spent years adapting to survive. You don't just get over that. There's no magic fix. There's no quick solution. There's a lot of hard work that takes a lot of courage, a lot of diligence, and it's a bit messy. You don't get it perfectly the first time. It's up and down. And so it's learning to be patient with yourself, compassionate with yourself. That is really important. I just want to make a little observation here. You desired to connect with your birth mother. And I would say, fantastic. I've seen many, many people that's a natural desire if you've been adopted. But it didn't work out for you. And I think you got it right. It was premature. Your healing wasn't far enough to be able to handle the triggers, your family's healing, your mom's healing, all of that. And so it just broke down. And so what I would encourage you is to say, maybe down the road, when I get healthier, I might be able to revisit that. But right now, I just need to focus on healing me. Now, the big thing I want you to hear is there is hope. I have worked with many, many people who have severe trauma like yours, even worse. And I have watched them do the hard work over months and years and really begin to grow and change and just find connection, find how to get their needs met in healthy ways. And it's just a beautiful transformation to watch. So I really hope that you can take some hope from my hope for you. What I would encourage you, if it's all possible, is to find one or two safe people that you can begin to connect with. So that can be in person, that could be online. But you're able to begin to find support, connection, people that understand. That to me is going to be a big piece of getting started on this journey. So there is hope. There's a lot of work to do. There's people that can help you do that work. People that have mapped out and defined what that's going to look like and give you the tools to do it. I really hope that you're able to begin this journey. And I think within a few weeks, a few months, you're going to start to see some very positive changes. So thank you for that letter. For those listening, I hope it helps many of you, especially if you're at the same point as us, wondering where to begin. Until next time, thank you.